Good morning, my friends. This is Paul, and boy, am I on a reviewing spree. I certainly hope I'll have the energy to survive tomorrow with going to bed at nearly 3 in the morning. But this is for the sake of not sure if this person is a subscriber or not, because my subscriber list only shows people that have made their subscriptions public. But someone who spoke to me in one of my live streams suggested that I do a top 10 Wii Games list, and I have no good reason why I haven't gotten around to this, so my sincerest apologies if you end up watching this, but I have gotten around to it right now, and I'm going to be listing them in order from my least favorite to favorite. Now, I know people have suggested that I do more music in my videos, but Nintendo is really strict about the content shown in their videos unless you're part of the Nintendo Creators Program. So, I won't be able to display any music on here because, well, it's Nintendo and all of these are first-party Nintendo titles, so I'm sorry, but hopefully the sound of my fan and my theatrical background will help. So with that, I'm going to start with number 10 is Kirby's Dream Collection for the Wii. This was the last Nintendo-published game on the Wii. To be more precise, probably more like a collection. And for any of you that thought that the Super Mario All-Stars re-release on the Wii was kind of a lackluster addition, heck, they didn't even update the menus to have Wii controllers. And the game was basically like a virtual console port of the Super Nintendo game, but without the addition of Super Mario World. Kirby's Dream Collection is a proper celebration of Kirby's 25th anniversary? I kind of forgot, but it doesn't really matter because I've never been a huge Kirby fan except for Kirby Superstar Ultra. And this collection is the main reason why I love that game as much as I do. It has 6 Kirby games. Not going to list all 6 of them because that'll probably make me out of breath. And while it's great to have so many of these titles in an accessible form, especially because the Game Boy titles never actually received a Wii Virtual Console release. And that's pretty incredible to do that without having to whip out a 3DS. Now, a lot of special features that might have been included in the original releases have unfortunately been removed, like the Game Boy Kirby titles don't have Super Game Boy enhancements, and you have to be stuck with a border around the screen, so it took into account that the games were released on smaller screens at the time, but I wish they would have optimized it for widescreen TVs, especially since this was released in 2012. But, regardless, they play pretty much as you'd expect, although they still have all the faults you'd expect. These are not remakes in any way, shape, or form, except perhaps Kirby 64, because in the original version, you couldn't use the control stick. You had to use the D-pad. Now, you can actually not only use the control stick, but you can also use the GameCube controller. So, that really helps, because in my opinion, that's Nintendo's best controller so far. Also, I like how Dream Collection adds a lot of bonus features to fish out the collection. I was lucky enough to get the soundtrack CD, which contains plenty of amazing Kirby music. Plus, there's an art book. I didn't get the luxury of getting that, but that's a really cool addition. And on the disc itself, you also get a museum that has a variety of fun facts. You can look up trailers and box art for any Kirby game that was released prior to 2012. There's 3 episodes of the Kirby anime that you can watch. Not that I'm a huge fan of them, but nice fan service nonetheless. And there are challenge stages based on Kirby's Return to Dreamland that were created especially for this game, which is really cool because I actually kind of liked that game because it reminded me of Superstar. Definitely a game for Kirby fans, and if for no other reason, get it for Kirby Superstar, because while it may not have the additional bells and whistles of the DS remake, it's still a superb Kirby game that has like a bunch of games in one, and considering that there are already 6 games in the collection, that basically doubles with Superstar, so it's really good value. Number 9 is Wii Sports Resort for the, well, Wii. What other system would it be for? If Wii Sports was supposed to demonstrate the capabilities of the Wii Remote, it felt like a tech demo in comparison to Wii Sports Resort, which was designed to showcase the Wii Motion Plus, which is basically, well, this is what the Wii Remote should have been, but we took forever to get around to it. The game takes advantage of the added gyro sensitivities of the Wii Motion Plus, and it provides 24 activities all spread on one tropical island known as Woohoo Island, which is such a well-designed place that it actually made its way into other Nintendo games, including, but not limited to, Mario Kart 7, Pilot Wings Resort, and Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. Hopefully more as we go down the road. I like how the games function really well on their own. There's not really a game in this collection besides maybe canoeing and cycling where the Wii Motion Plus doesn't feel as good as it should, especially when you're sword fighting or bowling. In which case, I actually did better at bowling in this game than I do in real life. And the game also has plenty of achievements to make up for the fact that the Wii doesn't have a leaderboard. Woohoo Island also has a good way of making the sports feel connected. Like when you're playing the airplane game, you can actually see the locations of the other games and even receive trivia of the island. When you're in the bowling alley, you know that the bowling alley exists because you can see it during other parts of exploring the island. And then when you're doing archery, you can sometimes get to areas that are hard for the plane to reach. The fact that everything feels like the game has a hub world, which is a huge rarity for a minigame collection, is really stellar, and the graphics are really good for a Wii title. And it makes good use of individual Miis by giving individual save files for each minigame per Mii, which is great when I want to tear down my foes as the villain from my book. Number 8 is Mario Kart Wii. This is by far not my favorite Mario Kart. Mario Kart 8 would have to take that crown. But Mario Kart Wii is definitely a step in the right direction. It went away from the radical change that Double Dash offered, and it went back to the more traditional controls of Mario Kart 64, innovating enough to make it feel like a next step forward in the console Mario Kart series, but also not trying to be radically different. I mean, the biggest things that you could say here were they added bikes, motion controls, and 4 save files, plus a Mario Kart channel, which unfortunately I don't think exists anymore. It was a cool idea at first, and you can also perform tricks off of ramps and certain half pipes. The courses were well designed to take advantage of the tricks and felt a lot more fun and free roaming, and the original version even came with a plastic Wii wheel that made you feel more like a driver if you were playing with the Wii remote sideways. Eventually I just stuck to the GameCube controller, which worked way better than it did in Double Dash. And in case you didn't like the drifting mechanics, the game also gives you a chance to auto-drift, which honestly, I know some people say that actually ruins a lot of the courses, but if you have the right combination of bikes and characters, you can get away with pulling off amazing runs with auto-drifting if you know what you're doing. I did. I was the master of Mario Kart Wii for a long time, even being able to speedrun Rainbow Road, but I'm probably going to be rusty at it if I ever return. If you don't have a Wii U or a Switch or any of the more modern systems, Mario Kart Wii is definitely perhaps the pillar of modern Mario Kart games on a console, and has a fairly amazing graphic style for what it was trying to accomplish, even if Mario Kart Wii is going to make it look super ugly in the future. And I'm really glad that bikes have become a new mainstay, as karts, especially after Double Dash, started feeling really clunky. Number 7, New Super Mario Bros. Wii. When this game came out, it was well before the new series was starting to wear out its welcome. New Super Mario Bros. Was an amazing hit on the DS because it brought back classic side-scrolling Mario that the last time we had seen it was in Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins, and on a console back in Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. New Super Mario Bros. Wii wasn't a radical departure from the overall style that the original New Super Mario Bros. Established, but it added multiplayer to the mix, which was both a blessing and a curse depending on who you played with and how many people you played with. It also ramped up the difficulty, making it feel more like a traditional side-scrolling Mario, but not to the point where it became unfair. And even if it was, it introduced the controversial Super Guide, which I know a lot of people nitpick and say it's becoming Mario for babies, but you can turn it off after a certain point, and it never will collect any of the star coins or secret exits. So if you're a 100% completionist, even the Super Guide can't get you that far. It also gives you a chance to play as Luigi solo instead of restricting him strictly to multiplayer. The levels are for the most part well designed, and the graphical step up from New Super Mario Bros. Is really big, even if it's not going to blow minds as far as Wii owners. New Super Mario Bros. Wii has fairly generic music, but it makes up for it with good boss fights with the Koopalings, again, before they wore out their welcome, plenty of Super Mario World and Super Mario Bros. 3 fan service, and one of the best, if not the best, final Bowser battles ever made. Definitely pick it up if you can't get New Super Mario Bros. U or Super Mario Odyssey. Again, it seems like a lot of these choices are strictly there because this is a Wii list, not a best games ever list. Number 6 is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Now, I wasn't the hugest fan of this game. There are a lot of Zelda games that I consider vastly superior, but I definitely think this is a good Wii game, and it took advantage of the Wii Motion Plus better than most people. Maybe it's because I actually had a really good setup on my TV. My brothers didn't seem to agree, but I didn't have nearly as many problems with the motion controls as most people said they did. Like I said, with Mario Kart Wii, I eventually became kind of a speed demon at most of the Silent Realms and boss battles, including the final one. I'm a bit rusty nowadays, but one of the biggest joys of Skyward Sword is the fact that most of the controls are based on your dexterity skills with your wrists. When you're fighting an enemy, you're the one swinging the sword, you're the one blocking the shield, and that's basically what you're given as the game progresses. Eventually the game focuses less on items and more of just raw swordplay. It tries to do a lot of things new with the Zelda formula, and while most of them end up falling flat, like the sky, for example, is the most boring overworld the series has ever seen, but on the other hand, it also introduced Skyloft, which basically put everything in one place. Again, cool, but it hasn't really been seen again since then. Skyward Sword, on the other hand, suffers from a lot of repetition and some very unnecessary, dragged out parts of the game just because Nintendo felt they needed to make it longer. The game also retreads old territory a lot, which admittedly most Zelda games have, but Skyward Sword kind of pushes it to the extreme. But nevertheless, when it's good, it's really good, especially when the game takes away the sword, ironically. But the game does have some great boss battles, and it's the first Zelda game to have an orchestral soundtrack. So it's definitely worth a try, just expect it to be much more linear and repetitive than you'd expect from a Zelda game. Number 5 is Punchout for the Wii, essentially a remake of the NES classic Mike Tyson's Punchout, or now that the license expired, it goes by Punch-Out featuring Mr. Dream on Virtual Console re-releases. Punch-Out for the Wii didn't try to revolutionize the series, but it basically did a Twilight Princess and sort of refined it enough where it felt like a new game, but still was faithful enough to the original where it didn't stray too far. One of the biggest differences I could see, because I actually did play a little bit of Punch-Out on the 3DS Virtual Console, was instead of having the action zoomed out in a top-down view, the game was more akin to the arcade version of Punch-Out, where you're playing behind Little Mac, who's silhouetted so you can see your opponent, and his opponents are typically towering over him because he's only 5'7". And instead of feeling like a legitimate wrestling sim, it's more of a puzzle game, as you have to learn the proper way to dodge your opponent's attacks, when to punch, how to punch, so on. The game does support motion controls, but I found it a lot easier to just hold the Wii Remote sideways and play classic style. Punches felt very satisfying, especially with the Wii Remote's rumble feature, and the voice acting was really incredible, featuring voice talent from all across the globe depending on who you were facing, and Doc Lewis's commentary was priceless. I felt like he did a good job of encouraging the player to keep persevering every time I got knocked out in a match. And eventually I felt like I just kept getting further and further and further in each match. The game had a generous save feature that didn't boot you back to the end of a league, but instead booted you back to the beginning of a fight, which is a really fair compromise, especially considering that the Wii doesn't have a restore point feature on its games. The only thing that truly was awful in my time playing Punch-Out was the multiplayer mode. It lagged like crazy, and Gigamac felt like too much of a cop-out for those of us that just had dumb luck. My friend Nick and I, we got bored of it within seconds and ended up laughing our way through it, mostly out of sheer stupidity rather than actual fun. So if you're going to play it solo, by all means, pick it up. If the Wii U Virtual Console is still running by the time you watch this video, that would definitely be a good way to play it, as the game also supports gamepad-only play, which the Wii version doesn't have. Number 4 is Donkey Kong Country Returns. This game is what I call the god of platforming. I absolutely revered this game, from the amazing music to the controls to the fact that it actually has a zoomed out camera, which I appreciate much more after playing Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. I like how the game has so much going on, and yet it hardly ever repeats concepts. Both the foreground and the background have constant interactions with each other, and the levels feel much more organic and connected than, say, blocks floating in midair for no reason like in New Super Mario Bros. The game gives levels their own names so that you feel a sense of identity and progression. And the world map lets you select between different sections. Now, admittedly, the cave has entirely minecart and rocket barrel levels, so that will definitely infuriate some players. But other than that, the level variety is staggering, and Cranky's Shop helps offset the game's brutal difficulty. Admittedly, I wish that there were options to lessen the impact of the minecart and rocket barrel levels, as one hit and you're dead, no matter what item you have. Thankfully, this was rectified in the 3DS remake and in Tropical Freeze. But, thankfully, the game's fairly somewhat generous checkpoints and overall level of just one more try and I'll do it, overall made it a lot more satisfying than the original Donkey Kong Country. I still love Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and even when playing it on the 3DS, the 30 frames per second drop wasn't actually noticeable at all. I don't think Returns is the ideal way to play it, as the 3DS version features a lot more helpful items plus 9 additional levels, but Donkey Kong Country Returns is definitely still a masterpiece of a platformer on the Wii, and especially if you're tired of Mario's adventures, Donkey Kong handles differently enough where you feel like you're not necessarily playing a carbon clone of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. And that final level that you get for beating all the temples is absolutely priceless and features some amazing Donkey Kong Jr. fan service. So amazing that Nintendo put a copyright strike on my gameplay footage. But oh well, c'est la vie. And Diddy Kong actually proves useful besides just as a second character. But I don't want to talk much more because this video is approaching 20 minutes and I still have 3 items left. Next up is, at number 3, Super Mario Galaxy 2. I really wanted to put the first Super Mario Galaxy on there, but Super Mario Galaxy 2 improves it in so many ways that not only did I want this to be a democratic list, but I wanted to highlight just how much better of a sequel it was. At first glance, it seems like it's just a ROM hack of the first Super Mario Galaxy, but that would be unfair if you don't consider how much stuff this game added to the experience to make it truly worthy of the number 2. Yoshi in and of himself could have been the only addition and I would have been satisfied, with his 3 power-up fruits and his flutter jump, and never wearing out his welcome in any galaxy he's in besides maybe the Starshine Beach galaxy. Yoshi is really a game changer and truly changes the way that you see the Galaxy games. Power-ups are kept to a minimum this time, but they're all wonderful, at least the returning ones. I kind of wish they would have done away with the spring mushroom, but the power-ups that do return otherwise feel much more like the Galaxy was designed to take advantage of their limitations, and most of them are in a side-scrolling format, which makes them easier to manage. Super Mario Galaxy 2 continues with the orchestral soundtrack and great graphics of the original, while providing a lot more fan service and more post-game content. Admittedly, a lot of the post-game stuff drags like a lot, especially after you gather 120 stars, but the Grandmaster Galaxy is well worth it, and while it may seem frustrating at first, eventually once you master it, you feel like a Mario god. I eventually was able to speedrun it so much, my sister was annoyed at me. Nowadays, I can't really do that as much, but I definitely hope to retake the challenge if I ever find a way to get my uploads of Wii and Wii U captures to go faster. Super Mario Galaxy 2, while it's very linear, is also very polished and refined. It definitely feels far more than a standard Mario, like I kind of thought Mario Odyssey was at times. And while it may not reach the ambitious, almost open world style of that game, it definitely is worthy of being a good successor to the side-scrolling Mario games while still embracing 3D movement. Number 2 is Super Smash Bros. Brawl for the Wii. Seems like there's... silly me, all these games are going to be on the Wii. It's a top 10 Wii games list. I'm going to still keep going. Don't want to make this a blooper list when I've gone this far. Brawl, in my opinion, was basically the epitome of what Smash could accomplish. And if there's a future Smash game coming, well, we know there's one coming on the Switch, but if it's going to succeed, it's pretty much just it's going to have to be Brawl, but better, and actually have a story mode, unlike the Wii U and 3DS versions. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was basically the bigger, the better. Stage builder, a much bigger adventure mode with way more cutscenes, a humongous soundtrack, a great character roster, well, mostly great. There are a couple of stinkers like Olimar in there, and some unbalanced choices, but for the most part, this is the most polished Smash game. It's so much fun to just duke it out on a variety of amazing stages that provide good homage to classic Nintendo series while also improving the graphics to make them feel right at home with the Wii's horsepower. It's also one of the few Wii games that actually feels like it looks objectively good, even if it's not just by Wii game standards. Like, the textures and cinematics are absolutely mind-blowing. The cinematics alone, perhaps rivaled only by Metroid Other M. Brawl is not for everyone. I know there's going to be plenty of people that prefer Smash for Wii U or Melee because of the speed and the balance, respectively. But I still respect Brawl for trying to push the series to its utter limits, even to the point where some Wiis couldn't even handle the game. My Wii being a particularly notorious example. But I still think that Brawl is perhaps the Breath of the Wild of the Super Smash Bros. Series at the current moment. And if they have any chance of making the Smash Bros. Series go forward, they're really going to have to either change directions or find some way to just amplify Brawl's success, like maybe an adventure mode with dialogue, or having a 3D mode, or having stages that put more emphasis on background details, stuff like that. Still, if you only have a Wii and can't get any other Smash Brothers game, Super Smash Bros. Brawl is definitely a must-buy, especially if you're a casual player, as it seems to cater more to that audience than to the hardcore. And finally, oh boy, this is going to be a controversial one, but I don't care. This is my list, so I'm going to do it my way, and that's Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. The absolute, nearly perfect sequel to Path of Radiance, and in my opinion, the pinnacle of the Fire Emblem series. It basically retains all of the improvements that Path of Radiance introduced, and then introduces even more, so that the Fire Emblem gameplay is fine-tuned to perhaps the best degree that the series has ever seen. So fine-tuned, in fact, that a lot of the series felt like it couldn't even compete and went backwards in many of its additions, including double S weapons, improving the way the base works, and overall making each map feel like it's a natural part of the story as opposed to just being there for its own sake. The maps also benefit from being really big and introducing terrain elevation as an extra strategic formula. The game also has a great world-spanning story that constantly switches perspective that, while from a gameplay perspective, it may make the difficulty feel unbalanced, but it does a great job of helping you constantly have that moral gray that the series has desperately needed, like, forever. It also gives you an excuse to space out your army placement and give more of a chance to try to upgrade as many people as possible, especially if you're playing on easy. Now, a lot of people criticize this game for being the downfall of the Fire Emblem franchise, at least until Awakening, because of its brutal difficulty, but the main reason why people think it's so hard is because they started out by playing on normal, because they thought, well, I'm a Fire Emblem veteran, Paul, and I can handle this. No, you can't. Start out on easy and work your way to hard. Hard, I promise you will have tears coming from your eyes if you're not good at math. But easy is hard enough where if you don't feel prepared, you are going to be clobbered at the end game. But the game gives you more than enough options to help get you through the earlier levels so that very rarely does it feel unfair, except maybe the first opening levels where you don't have that many party members. I'm not going to say the game's perfect. The AI is pretty awful, especially if you're trying to have partner characters do tasks for you. Even if you tell them what to do, they'll often rush to their deaths in very suicidal moves, or refrain from doing something elementary. And the support conversations are just awful. In a series that's known for having great character development, Radiant Dawn seems to push aside many of the beloved Fire Emblem characters, or beloved Path of Radiance characters, and just says, okay, well, you were kind of there, so we'll bring you back for its own sake. And the supports are basically just one paragraph sentences that sometimes don't even match up with each other. But, on the plus side, the game does have GameCube controller support, in case you prefer the Path of Radiance controls, has a library and a family tree, in case you haven't played Path of Radiance and need to catch up on the happenings of that game, and has some of the most mind-blowing cinematics of the entire series. Definitely a must-play among the Fire Emblem series, even if it's not nearly as newbie-friendly as some of the later entrances, especially that permadeath. It will really sting at first, but it will also help you realize how to be a better general in the process. With that, thank you very much for watching. If you disagree with my list, please feel free to let me know what you think your top Wii games are. Even if you have some recommendations for Wii games I haven't played, I'd be more than willing to hear it, as long as it's not something like Mad World, where it's just too over the top. With that, thank you for watching. Hope this didn't drag on too long, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.